please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, 17 months after demonetization of high denomination currency notes, ATMs across the country face a shortage of cash. The government has been video conferencing with public sector banks to take stock of the situation, and according to a government official, they're confident that 80% of ATMs will be fully functional within a day. The Reserve Bank of India has declared that there is no cash shortage. It's also formed state-level committees to monitor the situation. Now, according to a report by Credit Suisse, historical trends show that there is nothing unusual in this increase in demand for cash. In fact, according to Credit Suisse, it is the lowest increase in demand since 2013. The report cites hoarding of 2,000 rupee notes as well as the lack of printing of the new 2,000 rupee notes as the possible cause for the apparent shortage. A report by State Bank of India shows that ATM withdrawals rose by 12.2% in the second half of FY18 versus the first half. The report does, though, say that the cash shortage does seem to defy logic since currency in circulation is above the pre-demonetization level. Two former finance ministers, P. Chidambaram as well as Yashwant Sinha, have shot off several questions to the government seeking answers, and we will discuss all of that and more with Soumyakanti Ghosh, Chief Economic Advisor at State Bank of India, Praveen Chakravarti, Chairman of Data Analytics Department at the Congress Party, Syed Zafar Islam, spokesperson of the BJP. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the show. Praveen, let me start by asking you, and let me quote to you what Neelkant Mishra at Credit Suisse says. He says, from the government's perspective, the high denomination notes as a percentage of currency in circulation has perhaps settled at a higher level than it was at pre-demonetization, and this is an attempt to re-normalize or reduce it. Secondly, he points out that to address shortages at ATMs, the challenge is more of a distribution one rather than a currency availability one, and hence should dissipate. So, sum and substance, it boils down to the printing as well as the circulation of the 2,000 rupee note. That's what it seems to suggest.
Yes, I think, first we have to take a step back and really ask the question, is there a shortage or not? The RBI's press release is titled, RBI clarifies that there is no currency shortage. And it says there is no currency shortage, and then it goes on to say, but we are ramping up printing of currency notes in all the 4 presses. It says there is no shortage, but there may be some shortage in some pockets due to ATM. There is no shortage, but we are taking extra precautions because we are witnessing large unusual cash withdrawals. Is there a currency shortage or not? If there is, then clearly the RBI should first acknowledge that. The second is, it's unclear to me. On one hand, I hear some from the government say that this is due to an unusual spike in demand. What you have just told me and read out from the Credit Suisse report is one of a supply and a logistical problem. We don't seem to be having a handle on whether there is a problem or not. When I say we as a nation, between the government and the RBI. And second, if there is indeed a problem, is it a demand-driven problem or a supply-driven problem? Let's get to that first. And I think it is really important that we need to get this clarified. I think we can't hide behind things like why the RBI chests and vaults are full, the ATMs may have a problem. Why is there a problem in the ATMs today? What are we, all the things that we're talking about, currency in circulation as a percentage of GDP and all of that, this remonetization activity has been going on for the last year and a half. Why is there a shortage today? Why is there a shortage this week? Why is there a shortage this month? There is absolutely no data, and I've looked at all sorts of data, including high denomination notes, currency in circulation, M3 to GDP, all of that. There is nothing to suggest that in this month of April, we will be witnessing a currency shortage. So clearly there is far more to this than meets the eye, and I first would urge both the RBI and the government to first come out and categorically explain where the problem is, where they think the problem is.
Valid points that you make there, Praveen, and I'll get Syed Zafar Islam to respond to that as a representative of the BJP and spokesperson for what the government may want to say as well. But let me come to Soumya Kanti Ghosh. And Soumya, you've put out a report suggesting it's the non-genuity of cash shortage. But Soumya, you yourself in your report say that what we're seeing, whether it is the spike in demand, which anyway in the second half of the year is higher, cash withdrawal in H2 is always higher versus H1 because of the festival season as well as the procurement season. But how do you explain what seems to be both a supply as well as a demand side issue, Soumya?
No, I think first we need to acknowledge that the currency in circulation is now more than what was the pre-demonetization level in November 2016. Now, having said that, I think the issue lies elsewhere. The issue lies elsewhere. The problem is that if you have said the RBI possibly is now, 2,000 rupee notes, even the government has said yesterday that the 2,000 rupee notes, they may be printing less or whatever is its circulation, it is there. So the problem is now, and the government is also trying to change the currency composition in favor of the smaller denomination. For example, 200 rupee, 100 rupee, 50 rupee, 10. So what is happening is that when you are doing a transaction with a higher denomination, and if that currency, it seems that that currency is not getting adequately circulated in the system, if you look into try to do some state-wise velocity of circulation. So that is actually the crux of the problem, since this 2,000 is not getting adequately circulated.
So you're saying that...
So you have to go to the ATM maybe.
So you're basically saying that this forced shift...
Yes. So there is a
so you're saying this forced shift in currency composition to smaller denomination is leading to this issue?
Exactly. So because what was previously, if you are doing a 10,000 rupee transaction with 2,000 rupee notes, now if you are doing it 200 rupee notes, you have to do it 200 rupee notes. So that means the ATM may not have the capacity to dispense 200 rupee notes at one point of time. So therefore, the ATMs may be going dry if you are doing that repeatedly.
That's one argument. That's one argument on the ATM side. But Soumya, let me put to you what Mr. Chidambaram has tweeted, and this is the question that he's asking the government. He says, is it correct that currency in circulation has increased by only 2.75% since demonetization? If so, I maintain that the government, Reserve Bank, are not allowing money supply to grow at the same rate as the nominal GDP. Soumya, what is the shortfall? Because if I look at your report, then basis nominal GDP growth of 10.8% in FY17 and 9.8% in FY18, we should have been at about 19.4 lakh crores, and we are currently at about 18.29 lakh crores, right? So there is a shortfall there.
No, I agree to your point that there, if you look actually at the nominal GDP growth rate, the perceived currency in circulation should have been higher. But you have to also take into account the fact that there has been shift to digital transactions. So it's difficult to say how much could be a possible shortage if the currency could have expanded the nominal GDP growth rate, because in the last 1 year also there has been an enormous shift to the digital transactions. So that is difficult to quantify. But the point which you are saying that maybe the currency in circulation could have been at a higher level, the post demonetization at more than 18.3 lakh crores.
Okay, so you are suggesting that it should have been higher. Yes, Praveen, go ahead.
It could have been higher.
Shereen.
No, see, I think the other...
Syed, I'll just come to you just a second.
Is talking about currency. No, so the currency in circulation can't be looked at in absolute numbers. So the currency in circulation as a percentage of nominal GDP was around 12% flat between 2009 and 2016. Between 2009 and 2016, we clearly saw a multi-fold jump in digital transactions even then. But the currency in circulation as a percentage of GDP stayed flat at 12%. It tells us something. It tells us that the steady state for India's economic growth, the currency in circulation should be around 12%. After demonetization, it fell down to 9%. Today, it is at 11%. So it is wrong to say that currency in circulation as a percentage of GDP is okay because there may be a shift to digital transactions. That is not what empirical evidence shows.
Okay, all right. I'll get Soumya to respond to that, but let me go across to Zafar Islam. Zafar, you've heard the points that have been made on the program. Let me now put to you the questions that have come in from another former finance minister, Yashwant Sinha. He sent the government 5 questions. 1, what is the reason for the sudden spurt in demand? And that's the question that we've been trying to ask the government as well. Two, if it is seasonal, then why was it not anticipated? If it is a one-time hike, then what could be the reason behind it? Before I get to the other three questions that he sent in, Zafar, how do you address this? Because there is still no clarity. Do video conferences, the RBI has been meeting with PSBs, so you acknowledge the fact that there is a problem, but there are no adequate answers.
Shereen, apologies for the background noise because I'm at the Ranchi airport. But let me respond to the question you have posed and the other panelists have spoken. First of all, the cash to GDP ratio. If you see, even if some of them mentioned that it was 9%, and even when it was less than 11%, what it is today, we never faced that difficulty. Even if you see the last 3, 4 months, 5 months, we never had any problem of this sort. When we had cash to GDP ratio was much lower than what we have today. But having said that, what is the real problem? Real problem is something which has been mentioned by the finance minister. Probably all of us have ignored that it is not a uniform issue all across the country. It is in some pockets. In some pockets, when I say there are some pockets where you have
no. 1 second. It is across. It's fairly widespread. It is across at least 5 states, and that has been acknowledged by the government. They're not saying that it is in certain districts and so on and so forth. It is widely acknowledged by the government that the problem is being faced across several states, Zafar.
Yes, I do agree that the problem is in several states, but not on pan-India basis. And that I'm also acknowledging that there is no shortfall of the currency, but some currency is lying in some state, but the demand is in some other state, and that's why the logistic issues is more here.
So you've then preempted the question. So then you've preempted the 5th question that's coming from Yashwant Sinha, when Mr. Sinha says, why does the Reserve Bank not take into account the regional requirements of banknotes and plan accordingly? Why do we have a situation today where we have a glut in some parts of the country and shortages in other parts of the country? So there seems to be an issue as far as management, currency management is concerned, Zafar.
No, I'm not overly worried about the currency management, but what definitely the government has acknowledged, but all of us have acknowledged that there is a shortage in some states, and yes, that could have been avoided, even though the currency in circulation is higher than the demand. And of course, the demand is somewhere else, and the requirement is somewhere else, and that could have been, there's a logistic issue which could have been managed better than what we we could have avoided this issue. And something which is being worked out, even though the 2,000 rupee denominated note, which we have stopped printing, but the quantum, if you see the total quantum which is in circulation, is over 6.7 lakh crore. So that is already existing, and then we are printing 5 times.
That brings me. But Zafar, you just said that the 2,000 rupee note has been stopped from being printed, and that is the question that's being raised by people, that if the 2,000 rupee note the printing has stopped, why is that the case? If the 2,000 rupee note is being hoarded, what is the government planning to do about that? Again, these are questions that have been posed, and we do not have adequate or satisfactory answers.
No, Shereen, see, what is important for all of us to realize, to ensure that the black money holders should not have access to this high denominated currency. So if whatever it is there in the system, but you need to print more the lower denominated currency, and that's something which our government has always spoken about it, that lower denominated currency will definitely reduce the potential for for the black marketers to do illegal transaction, and that is something which I think all of us will understand, that that's the government's intent to reduce money supply in that manner, to higher denominated rupee note. But lower denominated note to 500 rupee note has been stepped up printing by five times. And that is something which is anyways bridging the gap.
But should the government not have anticipated that? If you're now saying that you're going to quadruple the printing of the 500 rupee note, the question then that is being asked is, should this not have been anticipated? But let me bring in the former banking secretary, Mr. D.K. Mittal, into this conversation. conversation as well. Mr. Mittal, thanks very much for joining us. You've heard parts of our debates. You've also seen the discussion and the response that's come in from both the Economic Affairs Secretary as well as the Reserve Bank. What do you make of the situation? On one hand, the government says adequate buffer stock, currency in circulation is higher than the pre-demonetization level. On the other hand, you have a situation 17 months after remonetization where ATMs clearly don't seem to have been recalibrated. Not all of them have. And there is genuinely a shortage at the ATM level, at least at this point in time, that's being faced across the country in several parts.
So there are 4 or 5 questions being raised. One, currency management is the sole domain of RBI. Government has little role to play except providing rupee 1 currency or the coins. And coins also part, that's what the government does, and that's also they coordinate heavily with the RBI. The second part is ATM being recalibrated is basically for the rupees 200 notes. The calibration of the ATMs is happening because these notes have come only recently, maybe a few months back. Thirdly, the question of currency not being available in market is not fair because if ATMs are dry, that does not mean there is no currency with the banks. I don't think there are any complaints that banks do not have currency. Now, ATMs require a specialized currency because all currency which is in the market cannot be used in ATMs. So it is possible that this kind of currency, which is required by ATMs, is not available, and that could happen. So the overall, the data which I've seen is that the money supply is better than what it was in the demonetization level. But this fact remains that with one-third currency being in the 2,000 notes and most of them not being in circulation or maybe less in circulation, there is a felt need for currencies of 500, 200, 100 to be more. And that's what the RBI has come up. So I think this should be looked at as something kind of a, not a very perfect assessment of the situation by the regulator. And it is possible in such a large country when this season for marriages comes up, the demand for notes goes up dramatically, and that's what has happened.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that there has been a problem at the end of anticipating demand that at the end of the Reserve Bank?
Absolutely. And that could happen with any regulator. See, no, you can't anticipate the full demand. I think one assessment which should have been understood very correctly, the 2,000 notes are not in use, and they are not very easy to be used by not very well-off persons because they find 2,000 rupees very heavy for them. So that is why this population would like to use basically 200 rupee note, which is very handy to them, which has not been in good supply. The 500 rupee note is in reasonable supply, 100 rupee note is in reasonable supply. It is 200 rupee note is in supply, and the lack of currency for ATM. That's a
so you're then echoing the point that Soumya Kanti Ghosh was making, that it is this forced shift in currency composition to smaller denomination notes that seems to be at the heart of the problem that we're faced with today. But let me also go across to Rituraj now of SIS to get a check on what's happening on the ground as far as the distribution is concerned. I'll come back to you in just a second. Ritu, thanks very much for joining us. Can you give us a sense of what is happening at the end of ATMs? Government officials telling us that, by today or tomorrow morning, we should have normalcy return across most ATMs. What's the picture on the ground?
Well, let me begin by saying that basis the amount of currency that was supplied for ATM loading yesterday and today, I do not believe that there is a cash supply issue here. I think there is a mismatch or an issue around availability of different denominations in different pockets. We are witnessing some challenges in specific states, AP and Telangana, parts of Gujarat, parts of Madhya Pradesh, parts of North Bihar especially, where there is a mismatch between the demand and supply of currency denominations, which the RBI has stepped in to address. And I think we are hoping that the cash supply will further improve in the coming days.
So, Ritu, how long have you been facing this mismatch? You've pointed out that this mismatch is being seen in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Bihar and other areas as well. So, how long have you been facing this mismatch on the ground?
Well, I don't think it's a... I don't think that this is the first time a mismatch is happening. The requirement of cash is very seasonal. it fluctuates day-to-day basis. The amount of cash that is required in the system in the first week of the month is very different from the amount of cash that is required in the same city in the last week of the same month. In local events, marriage season, other things which are localized events affect cash demand significantly. However, having stated that, one is also able to see a clear pattern where in the month of Jan, Feb and March, the number of ATM transactions per day have gone up by around 10 to 15% in most parts of the country. We have also seen that the amount of money withdrawn per ATM transaction has gone up around about 10% ballpark. So there is a boost in demand. The cash supply remains where it was, which has resulted in some demand-supply mismatch. I believe it's a matter of days before we overcome this crisis. So I don't see this to be a nationwide issue at all, and I don't see this to be a broad-based currency supply challenge.
Okay, so you're saying that there is a boost in demand as well as...
Can I just make one more point?
Yes, go ahead.
If you just do a back testing, Shereen, thank you. If you just do a back testing of the demand around this time and the buffer stock we have currency, and also the cash to GDP ratio across the world, you'll see we are much better off today in terms of circulation in the system, cash circulation in the system than we ever was. But it's just a mismatch in some pocket of the country, and whether we do not have that cash, and while the other pocket in the country itself has large amount of cash, but this is just a logistic issue which is being addressed by the regulator, by the government, and you will see by tomorrow you will have any.
No, to be fair, it's not. To be fair, it doesn't sound like just a logistics issue. It is a currency management issue, as the former banking secretary was also pointing out. But let me go back across to Praveen Chakravarti. Praveen, you wanted to make a quick point.
Yeah, see, I've heard all the points. Let me just pose a few questions, right? Okay, 2000 rupee note printing was stopped. As per reports, in July 2017, there was a report in the Mint newspaper that the 2000 rupee printing was stopped 5 months before, which means it stopped in February. So it is almost, it's more than a year since 2000 rupee note printing has been stopped. So this whole, change in mix is not something new. Second, there is clearly no evidence to show that 45,000 crores of ATM currency in circulation the first 13 days of April is any abnormality, as the Credit Suisse report that you referred to also indicates. So there is no abnormally high demand. The 2000 rupee note withdrawal is not new. The ATM logistics management is not again something that is very new. I think somebody mentioned that the RBI has failed to take into account the demand issue. Again, we are not in some sort of an external shock here that this is somewhat unusual. So why are all these being posed as excuses for what we don't? Why don't we just say we don't know? We don't have the answers.
Yeah, Soumya, would you agree with that? Because I think that's what your report also ends by saying, that it seems to be intriguing and it defies logic, because as Praveen was pointing out, and as I pointed out at the start of the program, while the government has said that it's an unusual spike and an unusual spike in demand, the data doesn't bear that out. If you look at what Neelkant is saying in the Credit Suisse report, he's saying that this is not abnormal. In fact, it is the lowest that we've seen in almost a decade. The ATM logistics issue, as Rituraj pointed out, is not a new issue. We've seen this happen previously as well. And the 2000 rupee issue is also not a new issue. The stoppage of printing has happened several months earlier. So what do you then make of this, Soumya?
No, first let me give a counterpoint. I think there was an argument made by the digital transaction growing exponentially in the earlier years. I think that is not correct. So, but there are data in the public domain. We can have a debate on that on a separate show. Having said that, I think I still continue to maintain that if you actually look at my reports, leave aside April, I think if you leave aside the earlier months, the amount of currency demand in the last 3 months has been significantly higher and has been the highest in the last 5 years. So my sense is that if you are trying to correct a distortion which has crept into the economy, 54% of the total share in small currency was in 2004, and this number came down to 13% when the currency was demonetized. And a lower share of small denomination notes actually begets a lot of problems. And I think that since we are now trying to do a compositional shift with the numbers now around 35%, I think that's the root cause of the problem. While I appreciate the fact and admit the fact that the currency printed at 18.3 lakh crores could have been a little higher if we had gone by the normal trends.
Yeah, let me end then by asking you that question, Mr. Mittal. Zafar, sorry, just a second. Mr. Mittal, let me ask you. Zafar, sorry, just a second. Mr. Mittal, let me ask you that question, the point that Soumya was making there, and this is the point that several other people have made as well, that going by the growth that we were seeing as far as nominal GDP is concerned, we should have in fact been at over 19 lakh crores, but we are at 18.29 lakhs in terms of currency in circulation. And Mr. Chidambaram's argument is that we are crippling the economy by this artificial constraint, so to speak. Your quick comment on that, sir.
No, I do not really think so, because there are countries which have a currency to money supply to GDP ratio of as high as 18%. Japan is a country with a 5%, so I don't think so. And with a lot of investment being made into digital money transfers, I don't think there's an issue. But the fact remains that there is a, as Mr. Ghosh has said, there is a, sort of not proper distribution between different currency notes. But that is the main issue which is coming to. And also the availability of currency required by ATMs. These are the two challenges which I think are not difficult to handle. They can be handled, and there is no crisis situation. Let's not create a crisis out of nothing. Branches are not refusing that we don't have currency.
Sure.
So that means they have money to be given to a customer. But
no, absolutely. No, I don't think we have used that word in our coverage at all. Neither today nor yesterday. We have not called it a crisis at all. We're in fact trying to understand what is the reason behind what the government acknowledges is an unusual spike, to quote the government, and and the measures that both the Reserve Bank and the government now seems to be taking forward. So we're not calling it a crisis at all, Mr. Mittal.
Shereen,
yes, Zafar.
But Shereen, this is Rituraj.
Shereen, maybe after him I will speak.
Shereen, hi, this is Rituraj.
Yes.
I just want to quickly step in. I think what we are witnessing right now, Shereen, is a cash supply mismatch that is emanating from a currency velocity issue. A 200 rupee denomination currency note is not conducive for high velocity. The number of times it changes hands is substantially lower than a smaller denomination, 100, 200 or 500 would. I think the Reserve Bank has indicated that more than 7 lakh crores of the 18.5 lakh crore of currency in circulation is in 2000 rupee denomination, which anecdotally and otherwise is not the best denomination for high velocity. And if the transaction velocity is not high, it's unlikely that the note will come back into the banking system to then go back again into the ATM. So I think fundamentally the Reserve Bank stroke government are absolutely approaching it correctly to introduce a larger volume of 200 rupee currency notes and 500 rupee currency notes, because that is the only long-term solution. Now, I just want to say that the real logistic, the root cause of the logistics here now is the fact that the 200 denomination note that came about a few months back has not been made available pan-India in the volume that is ideally required. It is also a challenge that the recalibration of ATMs for dispensing 200 rupee currency is behind schedule. Right? I think on a long-term basis, these two things have to be addressed for this to be streamlined.
Thanks for sharing that with us. And that was the point that DK Mittal was making as well, that there seems to be an issue even at the end of the 200 rupee note. And as Rituraj is pointing out, the recalibration of ATMs for the 200 rupee note running behind schedule. So that could have led to some issue, along with the fact that we're seeing this currency velocity problem that he alluded to. Gentlemen, I'm afraid we're completely out of time. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18 to help make sense of what seems to be, according to the government, an unusual spike in demand, and what can be done to ensure that there is better supply and demand matching. Appreciate your time here on CNBC TV18. We'll take a break. We'll be back with a lot more.